ISIS adjacency or ISIS neighborship. In previous videos, we learned about the ISIS adjacencies conditions, some of the ISIS neighborship rules. For example, we learned that how we can configure the router types to, for example, establishing neighborship about the configuring the same area ID or different area ID. And also we learned some other things. For example, we learned that system IDs should be different between routers and system ID should be unique between two routers to establishing neighborship. In this video, again, I'm going to talk about the ISIS adjacency, ISIS neighborship. Here, I'm going to show you other rules and other conditions that should be met for ISIS adjacency. Let me to start with the first easier, okay? The one of the rules that in ISIS we should obey is that the routers, for example R1 and R2 in this example, should use the IP addresses in same range between the connected interfaces. For example, if you are using in R1 the 10.1.2.1 as the IP address of the serial 10/24, you should use one IP address in the same range in router 2. For example, 10.1.2.2. If you are using IP address in different range, in different subnet with the R1, the neighborship won't establish. Why? It's easy to understand. Why? Because you know that when two routers connected in different subnets, they cannot send traffic to each other, and this means that when R1 and R2 establishing neighborship, they can't forward traffic between each other. Because of that, they need to be in the same subnet. Let me to show you, let me first to understand this feature. After that, we can continue our neighborship conditions. In R1, this is the R1 with empty configuration. Interface serial 10, IP address 10.1.2.1.255.255.255.0, and then no shutdown. And after that, I'm going to configure ISIS, router ISIS. The net is 49.0.0.1. Then quad 1, quad 1, quad 1, 0, 0. Log adjacency change all. And finally, we can configure the IS type as level 1. This is the level 1 router, okay? And after that, for interface serial 10, I'm using IP router ISIS command. Let me to configure R2 conf t interface serial 10. IP address is 10.1.2.2.255.255.255.0. Then for example, no shutdown. After that, we can configure the ISIS router ISIS. Then the net address 49.0.0.1, for example, and then quad 2, quad 2, quad 2, finally .00. And after that, we can configure log adjacency change all and IS type as level 1. That's it. Interface serial 10, IP router ISIS. We will have neighborship, ISIS neighborship. Look at here. Yes, we have neighborship between the router 2 and router 1. Show ISIS neighbors. Okay. And also in the router 2, show ISIS neighbors. As you can see here, we have one ISIS neighborship. Let me to change the IP addresses of the router 2 to other IP address. For example, let me to use this IP address 10.1.3.2. As you can see, these two IP addresses are not in the same range. Here in the router 2, I'm using conf t interface serial 10, then IP address 10.1.3.2.255.255.255.0. Show IS neighbors. Look at here. Now we have neighborship, but as you can see, the whole time is under the 20. This means that the whole time is going to 0. This means that after some second we will lose the neighborship. Now whole time is 3. Let me to wait for example 3 seconds. Now the neighborship goes to the down state. This means that we don't have neighborship. Show ISIS neighbor, and also in R1 show IS neighbor. Look at here, we don't have neighborship. Why? Because we use the different range of IP addresses in one link. Because of that, now you learn that we should configure same range of IP addresses in one link between two router. It's not important that router 1 is level 1 and router 2 also is level 1, or both of them are level 2, or one of them level 1 or level 2 and another is level 1 2. Okay, in all cases you need to configure the same range of IP addresses between two router. Okay, let me to correct the problem. In router 2 I'm using again conf t interface serial 10 with the IP address of 10.122.255.255.255.0. After some second we will have neighborship. Let me to wait for neighborship. After that we can continue our for example courses. IS adjacency to R1 serial 10 now has up status show IS neighbors. Also in router 1 show IS okay neighbors. Yes, everything is okay now. This is the next things that we learn about the neighborship. After the same subnet or same range between two routers, I'm going to talk about another condition that should be met to neighborship can be established, and that is the IS hello authentication. Okay, you know that in every protocol, for example, every routing protocol, for example, OSPF, BGP, EIGRP, and also RIP version 2, we have the mechanism of the authentication. In ISIS also we have authentication. This means that if you want, you can enable authentication to, for example, for neighborship. If the authentication enabled, okay, they should pass. If you don't enable authentication, you don't need to pass authentication. But if you enable authentication, you need to pass to the authentication for establishing neighborship. But before starting the authentication configuration, let me to talk about authentication specifically in ISIS. In ISIS, we have two types of authentication. The first type of authentication is the authentication between two routers for neighborship or hello authentication. In this type of authentication, we are using the passwords or the keys inside of the hello message, and this is the authentication for neighborship. But also we have another type of authentication ISIS, the authentication for LSPs or also some other packets of the, for example, ISIS. Okay, in the next section, in the LSP understanding, in the link state exchanging part of this course, I'm going to talk about the LSP authentication. But in this part, I'm going to talk about only the hello authentication. The hello authentication means the key or password is residing inside the hello message, and this authentication type only can be used for establishing neighborship. But in LSP authentication, we are using the keys inside of the LSPs, and that is the different type of authentication. We will talk about the LSP authentication in the future videos, but in this video I'm going to talk about the ISIS hello authentication. Let me to review. ISIS can separately authenticate hellos and link state, protocol data unit, or LSPs. If hellos means these packets, okay, are authenticated correctly, and LSP authentication fails, means that you have the same password in hellos, but you have different password in LSP, the adjacency will come up, but updates won't exchange because the hello authentication is sufficient for the adjacency, but the link state exchange is, for example, corrupted. So authentication, if configured for ISIS hellos or PDUs, protocol data units, must match on both the ends. Let me to talk about only the hello authentication. As you can see here, I wrote here ISIS hello authentication, not LSP authentication. Okay, let me to talk about this type of authentication. The first thing that we should know is that authentication is optional. What does this mean? This means that in neighborship conditions, we have some